lucky to have heard that original recording of a young boy on a country lane playing a tin drum. Simply magnificent. Hello and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I'm back in Bristol, England. I'm here for the next month and I have a different microphone down here, so I'm sorry if my S's are hitting a little hard, my P's are a bit intense for you, but I'm trying my best. The equipment is not quite up to my London standard. Right, today I think, you know what, I think we should probably look at one of Shakespeare's sonnets. That's something we don't often do on this podcast. That was a good joke, wasn't it? Right, of course we're looking at Sonnet 135 by William Shakespeare. We've hit another milestone, 135 baby, and I'm just going to warn you that this one is, or can be perceived as quite sexual, so we will be talking about sexual themes, and if that is too much for you, I would say turn away now. But if it's not, enjoy the ride. Let's take a listen, shall we? Sonnet 135. Whoever hath her wish, thou hast thy will, and will to boot, and will in overplus. More than enough am I that vexed thee still, to thy sweet will making addition thus. Wilt thou, whose will is large and spacious, not once vouchsafe to hide my will in thine? Shall will in others seem right gracious, and in my will no fair acceptance shine? The sea, all water, yet receives rain still, and in abundance addeth to his store. So thou, being rich in will, add to thy will one will of mine, to make thy large will more. Let no unkind, no fair beseechers kill. Think all but one, and me in that one will. Wow, this is a hell of a sonnet. It is incredibly sexual once you break it down, I think. I mean, I think most people would have to think that there's lots of sexual innuendos in this. And I think it's incredibly misogynistic in a lot of ways. And Shakespeare, he's not painting himself in the best light, I would say. And if this was a sonnet that he did indeed write to a woman, you would hate to receive it. I think it comes across, as I said, misogynistic. It is desperate. It's a bit pathetic. And of course, the word will is used a lot in this, and it's used as many different things. But we have to think that Will is also a play on his own name, William, Will Shakespeare. So obviously he's referring to himself at times. He's also referring to the penis. He's referring to the vagina in many ways, and sex in general, female will is desire. It's an interesting one. Let's break it down, shall we, and work out what the hell Shakespeare is going on about in Sonnet 135. So we start with, whoever hath her wish, thou hast thy will, and will to boot, and will in overplus. So here I think he's saying that whatever sort of sexual fulfillment or desire other women want, you have your will. And will here, I mean, again, as we work through this poem, will has a lot of different meanings. And will is obviously your will, you know, your wants, but also will, your William Shakespeare, potentially. And here he's saying, you have your will, and more will besides, and more will than you need. But I think he's also saying you've got a lot of sexual partners and you hold the power here, and you've actually got more will than you need in a way. So then he continues with, more than enough am I that vexed thee still, to thy sweet will making addition thus. And here he's saying, I who, constantly pester you in a way, and that's the bloody truth. I mean, over the last few sonnets, he has been constantly pestering this poor woman who's just trying to get on with her bloody life. But he has been constantly giving her sonnets and saying how hard it is to love her because it's not necessarily reciprocated, and the fact that she has many lovers potentially. So he's saying, I who constantly pester you will add myself to give you more than enough satisfaction. So here he's assuming that she's got various lovers, and he would like to put himself in the mix and go, hey, room for one more, milady? And he literally kind of says that right at the end. But can I join in? And there's some play on the word will here, that I think he's talking about, her vagina, and can she make some space for his penis in her vagina? Which is quite a wild thing to say in a sonnet, and he's getting very sexual all of a sudden. He hasn't really been so sexual in the previous sonnets to the dark lady, but here, holy moly. Then he continues this thought, really. He's saying, wilt thou, whose will is large and spacious, not once vouchsafe to hide my will in thine? I mean, this is just very clearly a sexual reference, I think. I mean, he's calling her vagina here. I think he's calling her vagina large and spacious. Shakespeare, come on, man. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I don't think you should be saying that a woman's vagina is large and spacious. And here, it doesn't necessarily have to be the vagina here. It could just be sort of sexual appetite is large and spacious. So you like to have sex. And why can't you allow me, little old William, inside just once? And of course, that's the other sexual reference. So he's saying, won't you allow me inside you? Just once, even. Hide my will in thine. So, penis and vagina action here. And that's what he's referring to. In my eyes, it can't be anything else. I mean, obviously he's using the word will, and there's many meanings to that, but this is the clearest in my head. He continues with, shall will in others seem right gracious, and in my will no fair acceptance shine? So here he's saying, are you going to accept other men's wills, aka penises probably? Are you going to accept other men's penises and not mine? That's not fair, is what he's saying. I mean, it totally is fair. Absolutely fair. She can have sex with who she wants. He's very petulant here. He's being very, very childish and pathetic and sad, actually. It's sort of giving the vibe of a text a man might send at 3 a.m. after having 10 pints at the pub with his mates, and this is what comes out, and then he reads it back in the morning and goes, oh God, what have I done? Something like that. And now he goes on to a metaphor. The sea, all water, yet receives rain still, and in abundance addeth to his store. So the sea, of course, is full of water, makes sense, but still accepts the rain. So even though it's full of water, it's still saying, come on into the rain. And it keeps adding more. And now, of course, he's going to link this metaphor back to the dark lady, where he says, so thou, being rich in will, add to thy will one will of mine, to make thy large will more. So, like the sea, you are rich in lovers, and can add me to the list. Come on. He's basically saying one more will won't hurt, will it? will it. That's just my own pun there, but yeah, I mean, one more will won't hurt, will it? Is what he's saying, which is just a completely insane thing to say. And also, he's accusing her of sleeping around with loads and loads of men. How many men is she sleeping with? Not like that's an issue, but you question, is she? Is she even sleeping with loads of men? Or is he just making this up? Is he just guessing? How's he know this? But again, the will here is very sexual, I think. And again, there's an argument for the will here being the vagina. So add to thy will, vagina, one will of mine, aka penis, to make thy large vagina more. Thy large will more. Which could well mean make your vagina bigger by adding another penis. I mean, it is real graphic sexual stuff. Obviously, he's not saying penis and vagina, but we all know what you're getting at, Shakespeare, and at the time, I'm almost certain they would have known what he was getting at here. It is filth, it's smut. And now, of course, we're on to the final couplet. Let no unkind, no fair beseechers kill. Think all but one, and me in that one will. And here, there's a few potential meanings, but I'm going with, don't be cruel and reject someone who's asking nicely. Look at me, I'm asking in a nice sonnet. I mean, it's not nice, it's absolute filth, but he's saying, I'm asking nicely. And think of all of your lovers as one. And invite me in. Come on, what's one more? Let me get in the mix. The other meaning, I guess, could mean when he says, think all but one. So forget about the others and just think of me. And me in that will. And so me with you. But I think seeing as he's talked about all these other lovers and he hasn't said, just stop thinking about them, get rid of them. He's just been saying, look, please, come on, look, you've got so many lovers. What's one more going to do? So I think that's what he means in this last line. And I'm going to go with that. I think it's a bit nicer. But yeah, you could read it the way of, forget those other lovers, just have me. But he seems fine, honestly, with the other lovers. Just like, the sea is fine accepting more rain. He's absolutely okay with that by the sounds of it. So come one, come all, in a way. Right, so there we have it, Sonnet 135. And this is definitely the filthiest of Shakespeare's sonnets. And I have been waiting a little bit for a filthy, smutty sonnet like this. So it is quite good to get into the weeds with it and work out what he's talking about here and all the filthy comments that he's making about penises and vaginas, etc., etc. And I think it's probably about time we put this to our story. And if you remember last week in Sonnet 134, Shakespeare and Ben Jonson, who are both in love with the Dark Lady, and they've met in the pub, and Ben Jonson has said, look, I'm in love with her. Shakespeare's going, yeah, thanks for taking the bullet, mate. I appreciate you sort of being in love with her so that it stops me being in love with her. And Ben Johnson's like, no, you've got the wrong end of the stick. That's not what I've been doing. I'm just genuinely in love with her. Shakespeare can't get that into his thick head. Anyway, they go to the Dark Lady's house, and she's a bit fuming about their arrival. She's like, oh God, these two. She lets them in, and Shakespeare's like, no, I can't leave. And she's like, you can, the door's open. He's like, I can't. You're trapping me. It's ridiculous. What you're doing is horrible. And of course, he says, I'm going to write a sonnet. So he goes to the living room, writes Sonnet 134, and recites it to Ben Jonson and the Dark Lady in her hallway. And he's saying in the sonnet to release Ben Jonson, who was just standing in for Shakespeare, just sort of there to soak up some of the love. But in this sonnet, he's saying, now I've lost Ben Jonson, who was a really good mate, actually, and now you've stolen him, and now we're both captured by you, and it's not on. So let's see how Sonnet 134 goes down with Ben Jonson and Dark Lady, and how Sonnet 135 fits into all this. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 134. The dark lady and Ben Jonson look at each other. They both roll their eyes and sigh. Ben Jonson says, "Shakespeare, mate, I wasn't standing in for you. I'm honestly just in love with this woman. I think she's great." The dark lady looks at Shakespeare and says, "He's right, Shakespeare. Look, you're a good-looking guy, and I'm not saying that something would never happen between us, but I'm into Ben Jonson, and yeah, you're friends, but I'm not stealing him away. You can leave whenever you want, both of you." Ben Jonson says, "I totally get that. I understand. I know that I can leave whenever, but I'm happy. I'm into you." And the dark lady says, "I'm into you too." And Shakespeare says, "Well, I am also into you. Not you, Ben. The dark lady. I'm into you." And she says, "That's really sweet, Shakespeare, but you're being quite weird about it now. And I think it'd be nice for just me and Ben to hang out tonight alone." And Shakespeare says, "This is ridiculous. You know I can't leave this house." And the dark lady goes over to the door and opens it and says, "Yes, you can. And you will." So Shakespeare looks at Ben Jonson and says, "Are you all right with this, mate? Are you sure? Because you obviously took the bullet for me." Ben Jonson says, "I didn't take the bullet, mate. I am into her, and yeah, I'm happy with you leaving." Shakespeare says, "Bloody hell, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I'm fuming." And with that, he steps outside, slams the door behind him. And the dark lady and Ben Jonson go up to her bedroom. She sleeps in a different bedroom to her husband, of course. I forgot to mention that earlier. Shakespeare stands out on the street for a little bit, and he's so angry about this situation because he's still in love with the dark lady, and honestly, look, it might sound a bit crass, but he wants to have sex with her. That's his main aim here. And you know what? She might be having sex with her husband. She might be having sex with Ben. But why can't he have sex with her as well? It's not fair. It's not fair. And he sits and whines for a little bit on her doorstep. And then he hears some sounds coming from the top floor of the house. Sexual sounds. Some moaning, groaning, bumping about. He thinks, bloody hell, I can't believe it. They're already at it. Not 5 minutes after I've left. This is not on. So, he sees the drain pipe going down the house and slowly starts to climb up it. 2 floors up, he slips slightly and catches himself. Oh, that was a close one. That could have been the end of Shakespeare. We might never have heard Hamlet or Macbeth. What a tragedy that would have been, he thought to himself. He wiped the sweat off his brow and climbed higher and higher until he got to the window where he heard the sounds coming from. He scrambled onto the windowsill and slowly peeped in. There was Ben Jonson and the dark lady, caught in the act. Well, they hadn't actually noticed him yet, but they were having sex, that's for sure. Shakespeare couldn't believe it. He was so angry, but at the same time, he thought, I'd quite like to have some sex too. This isn't fair. So, he thought long and hard and came up with a plan. And his plan was to, of course, write a sonnet about how annoyed he was with the situation. And he thought, instead of being angry, he would try and plead and ask the dark lady if there was room for one more, potentially. He sat precariously on the windowsill of the 3rd floor and wrote Sonnet 135 as the wind battered against him. Eventually he finished, and Ben Jonson and the dark lady were still going. They were having a great old time. Shakespeare suddenly banged on the window. They stopped and looked up and couldn't believe that Shakespeare was there in the window of the 3rd floor. He'd climbed all that way. Ben Jonson scrambled over to Shakespeare, completely naked. Shakespeare said, "Open a window." Ben Jonson said, "Go away." Shakespeare says, "Open up." Ben Jonson finally opens the window and says, "What are you doing up here?" And Shakespeare says, "Put on a dressing gown for God's sake. I can see your ghoulies." Ben Jonson says, "Sorry, yes, no, what are you doing up here? I'm not putting on a dressing gown. No, this is private, what's happening here." And Shakespeare says, "I've just got to read this sonnet to the Dark Lady, all right?" And Ben Jonson says, "No, it's not all right. She doesn't want to hear it." And Shakespeare says, "Please, will you hear it, please? It's just asking a question." Dark Lady looks at him and says, "If you read it, will you then go?" Shakespeare says, "Yes, I will. Just please let me read it." So she rolls her eyes and says, "Fine, but make it quick for God's sake." Ben Jonson stands fuming in the corner of the room as Shakespeare pulls out Sonnet 135 and reads. Sonnet 135. Whatever sexual fulfillment other women want, you have your will, and more will besides, and more will than you need. I, who constantly pester you, will add myself to give you more than enough satisfaction. Won't you, whose sexual appetite is large and spacious, allow me inside just once? Are you going to accept other men's wills and not mine? The sea is full of water, but still accepts the rain and keeps adding more. So, like the sea, you are rich in lovers and can add me to the list. One more will won't hurt, will it? Don't be cruel and reject someone who asks nicely. Think of all of your lovers as one and invite me in. So there we have it, Sonnet 135 and the story to go with it. This was a crazy episode. It was very sexual. The story got sexual. It had to. And I, for one, enjoyed the bit of spice that this podcast got this week. And I hope you did too. Maybe there'll be more of it next week. Who knows? Until then,